Good morning, guys. It's around 9 o'clock and good to see you all. And Anika and Carrie's with us this morning. And it's Wednesday, April 21st. And we're going to, on our schedule, we have 4:20, but I thought we ought to work on 434 a little more, and we asked Michael to make a few changes yesterday, and thought we should run through those, and then we will, if we have time, we'll switch to 420. So if there isn't any comment from anybody, I don't know if any of you have got anything that you want to say before we get right into the bill. But if there isn't, morning, Michael.
Good morning.
We'll turn it over to Michael, and we can go through the changes. We got all the way through that yesterday, right, Michael?
Yes, he did. And you asked for some revisions.
Yeah. Maybe we should do those first, and then we'll do a run through of the whole thing. And if everybody is, somewhat satisfied and at least enough to vote, we'll kick the bill out. But why don't we go through the changes first, Michael?
Okay. So as you've been doing, I'll just, you will have it on your committee webpage. It's on your committee webpage, and I'll just scroll through.
Yeah.
So the first change is on page 2, line 17. Previously, it had said explore methods and standards for transitioning farmers to alternative practices. And there was a request to strike alternative. So it's just 2 practices that reduce pesticide usage. You asked that language be added, that the board would explore methods and standards for farmers to engage in carbon sequestration or mitigation. So that was added. Then you wanted to add the language that was, this was a recommendation of Margaret Lagos, and I played a little bit with the language. It's on page 3, lines 3 through 6. They will study and issue recommendations regarding the feasibility of the use of biodegradable plastics in agriculture, establishing incentives for the use of biodegradable plastics in farming, and promotion of the production of biodegradable plastics and similar renewable chemicals in Vermont.
Yeah, any comment, but that should add to, I know we had a question yesterday, but it seems like it clarifies it and moves that whole issue in a positive direction. Any other comments from members? No.
Okay.
I guess we're good there. I don't, Carrie or Kanika, did you have anything on that?
Just on the language for the biodegradable plastics in farming, it says establishing incentives for the use of biodegradable plastics in farming. I mean, that just kind of makes it more of a mandate. Is there a way to make it so that that's, if, the study and the discussion of it kind of makes it seem like biodegradable plastics in farming is something that's feasible? Because if we're establishing incentives for a program that people on the board realize isn't feasible, I don't know if that language is clear enough as it is. And in addition, I still don't really understand why we need that and similar renewable chemicals, why it can't just be promotion of the production of biodegradable plastics in Vermont.
Okay.
The issue that we talked about yesterday was if you had biodegradable plastic and you had the right compounds, you could mix it with other agricultural products like corn stalks, hemp stalks, cannabis stalks, sawdust, and make it possibly into hopefully another product. And the idea behind this was to, have that in there so that if some chemical outfit came up with a solution where you could mix this in with other products to make another different product, that would be a good way to keep the plastic used up and not go to the landfill.
That makes sense to me, but I still don't understand the renewable, the other chemicals piece, but sorry, I interrupted.
Chris?
I do wonder about the incentives. We've heard that that's happening in some other states. But nowhere else here, recommend, we say, explore methods and standards for transitioning farmers to practices of reduced pesticide. We're charging them to think of a whole bunch of potential changes. And this is the only one that talks about incentives. I think we should take the incentive phrase out of there. They're charged to study and issue recommendations. You don't look very far to other states before you find incentives as part of the recommendation, but it does seem strange. Kanika, you're talking about similar renewable chemicals.
I'm talking about the strong language with establishing, and then 2 also, but I think I think it kind of makes sense to keep it as is if chemicals means other materials.
Yes, it would be a way to bond the other materials all together and come out with a different product. That's the way I took that when I listened to, the testimony.
What do people think about just nixing establishing incentives for the use of biodegradable plastics in farming?
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Chris, maybe I'm reading the sentence wrong, but the structure of the sentence to me, if you take the first part, study and issue recommendations regarding, and then move it down to establishing incentives, therefore you're not mandating that they establish incentives, you're studying and recommending whether they could. And maybe I'm not reading that sentence properly, but that's how I took it. I don't think it means to establish it, but maybe Michael wrote the sentence, so maybe I should be asking him.
Well, yeah. I agree with you, Sarah Collmore, for what it's worth. I just, nowhere else do we talk about incentives, and we are basically asking this group to study and issue recommendations for a whole host of things.
Yeah, Michael, you had your hand up earlier.
I think Senator Collmore's interpretation is what I intended. I can understand how it can be misread. And my other point was, instead of, I think the hang up in the last phrase is renewable chemicals. Instead of saying renewable chemicals, could you say biodegradable plastics and similar materials in Vermont? Yeah. And so then you don't have, what is a renewable chemical, the confusion about what that means.
I like that.
That as long as it's pushing in the direction that's going to try to make a product or a product that could be manufactured from that plastic. But I would almost, I don't know what the heck you'd mix with it if it wasn't some kind of a chemical to bond that plastic in the corn stalks or hemp stalks or cannabis stalks. That stuff is, if you could make like plastic planks or plastic boards, the cannabis stalk and the hemp stalk is very strong stuff. If they could figure out a way, how else would you do it if you didn't use some kind of a chemical product to bond that together?
I agree. I just think it's the renewable chemical. I think people are just getting caught up on what that means. And if you just go to similar material, it still brings in the whole concept of using those residuals and the biodegradable plastics to create products. And you don't have that confusion about renewable chemicals.
But it would mean the same thing.
That would be your intent, I believe.
Yeah, is that agreeable with the committee members?
Seems
Can
so.
you just say it again?
Yep. So I guess we'll do that, Michael. We'll try that language.
Can you read that sentence again, Michael?
Well, I don't know if you made the decision if you're going to strike establishing the incentives.
Yeah, well, we're going to take out the chemical parts and put in other similar products.
Right. Right. And but do you want the I think it was Senator Pearson that proposed taking out the established incentives, and I don't know if you made that decision.
Well, I don't know if we did make that decision. We want to encourage, I don't know about incentives, but we want to encourage, I believe, if this practice, if it can possibly be done, we want to encourage that to, I think, take place. I don't know what that means by incentives, monetary incentives, verbal meeting incentives, talking about, incentives doesn't necessarily mean monetary, does it?
No.
My point would be that study and issue recommendations permits them to come back with the notion of incentives, which is what other states are doing. I mean, I'd like to have some incentives, to explore methods of transition farmers to practice to reduce pesticides too, but we don't call it out there. I just don't know why we're highlighting it just in this one number. It almost suggests it shouldn't be looked at in other ones where they're similarly looking at questions and issuing recommendations.
Yeah. So what would that read like, Michael, with that change, with that out of there?
It would say study and issue recommendations regarding the feasibility of the use of biodegradable plastics in agriculture and the promotion of the production of biodegradable plastics and other similar products in Vermont.
Yeah. Any comment on that? So we're promoting we're promoting, but we aren't.
You could say promotion of the use or production of biodegradable plastics and other similar products in Vermont. Would that work?
And yeah, instead of incentives, we're going to be promoting the use, and is that agreeable with the committee?
Yeah, okay.
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 I think that would do it.
So could we ask Michael to read the whole thing now?
Sure. Study and issue recommendations regarding the feasibility of the use of biodegradable plastics in agriculture and the promotion of the use and production of biodegradable plastics and other similar products in Vermont.
Yeah, that, everybody, I think that sounds pretty straight up and good, so why don't we go with that, Michael?
Okay. All right, should I move on?
Yep,
All right, so now you're down into the membership of the board, and you wanted to have consistency for all of the farmers or farming organizations, but you also wanted to have an indication that the person should be an active farmer. So for all of the farming representation, it'll say an active farmer who is a member of an organization. And then the first one is representing the organic farming community. Then on page 4, line 6, it's going to be representing the dairy industry. And then lines 8 and 9, it's representing the fruit or vegetable farmers in Vermont. Yesterday it said fruit and vegetable farmers. And then the last is a member of an organization representing grass-based non-dairy livestock.
everyone, Corey?
I'd still like to have the dairy industry explicitly say conventional. We've got organic dairy, and then I'd like conventional so that, there isn't an opportunity to not, put two organic. I'm not saying it's an issue, but I'm just trying to make sure that that's there on that one.
Which line? That's I and O.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It says
Yeah,
representing the dairy industry in Vermont. And we already have representing organic farming, but I want to make sure conventional dairy is represented. I mean, even if we want to have the, I just worry that no one from conventional dairy will end up on this board.
So,
Well, I just point out that the Secretary of Ag makes these appointments, right? I mean, that would
Yeah,
be
but
quite
I
a
trust
turn.
this secretary, but someday there'll be a new governor and a new secretary that I might not, want it making that decision.
what would be the harm of having conventional before dairy? The word conventional. But I don't see any harm in adding that.
I'm fine with it.
So wouldn't we just have to add that one word, Michael?
Yes. Yes.
So it'd be a member of an organization. No,
No, it would be an active farmer who is a member of an organization representing the conventional dairy industry in Vermont.
yeah. And the other one is organic, organization or organic dairy farmer, right?
No, it's just
Organic.
organic farming.
Organic.
Yeah.
Yes, organic farming. Yeah. Well, that seems to be equitable. I mean, we've certainly got, we've got a lot of conventionals left and we've got a lot of organic. So, yeah.
Plus,
So
we're
I
getting
think that-
vegetable farmers, we're getting non-dairy livestock farmers. I think having the conventional with a seat at the table, like you said, gives that equitable piece.
Yeah.
I'm fine with this, but we're not pretending that there's some world where conventional ag is underrepresented, right? I mean, I'm totally fine with this. This is a strange conversation, though.
Chris, I will bring you for a tour this summer to a lot of conventional farms. We'll say they're underrepresented in Montpelier.
That'll make Corey's day. No, I think that, no, that's a good suggestion and what the heck. Okay, Michael.
Okay, so the next change is actually not really a change. It's a question that Margaret Lagis flagged last night, and whether or not there's a typo that's been in the law, in the seed review law, since the very beginning. And in that second sentence on page 6, It says, in order to ensure the appropriate use or traits of a new genetically engineered seed, and Margaret's point it should say use of traits of a new genetically engineered seed. I checked with Carrie yesterday evening, and he thinks it probably was a typo and it should be use of traits.
Yeah. You checked with who?
Carrie Jaguar, the agency.
Holy smokes. Got the lawyer calling the client now.
It's a substantive
No.
issue.
Yeah, well, no, I guess that is true. Yeah, so are you guys okay with that?
Yep.
Yep. Well, Carrie, I expected you to agree. You're the one that okayed it.
Yep.
It would be bad if you okayed it with Michael and then came in and voted the other way today.
Wouldn't be the first time, Senator, and I apologize for that.
No, that's good. Okay, Michael.
So the next change is on page 10. It's in the conforming revisions to the seed review committee. There was a reference to the seed review committee that was still in statute, and I had to replace that with the Agricultural Innovation Board. And so that's really just a technical change. And then those are the changes.
Yeah.
So should I get back to the beginning and walk through the entire?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure. So you're back on page 1, you're on line 7. There is an existing subchapter in chapter 215 that relates to regenerative farming. That subchapter would be renamed Regenerative and Innovative Agriculture. Within that chapter, there would be a new section added, 4964, entitled the Agricultural Innovation Board. The board would be authorized to implement certain authorities. The first was to review the historic pesticide reduction recommendations in the state and coordinate with existing work groups to avoid submitting to the General Assembly conflicting policy recommendations on the regulation of pesticides. Then they would recommend practices that reduce the use of and exposure to pesticides and synthetic fertilizers in order to protect soil biology, human health, and environmental health. They'd advise the executive and the General Assembly with respect to legislation concerning the use of agricultural pest control measures and integrated pest management. They'd recommend to the Secretary of Ag policies, rules, etc., for the use of treated articles when those treated articles have a hazardous long-term deleterious effect on the environment in Vermont, present a likely risk to human health, or are dangerous. They'd recommend practices to reduce the use and generation of waste associated with plastic and farming, incentivize farming practices that are looking to reduce the use and dependence on pesticides in their practice, advise the agency with regard to the regulation of plant biostimulants, recommend studies necessary for performance of its functions, explore methods and standards for transitioning farmers to practices that reduce pesticide usage, explore methods and standards for farmers to engage in carbon sequestration or mitigation, review the seed traits of a new genetically engineered seed proposed for sale, distribution, or use in the state, study and issue recommendations regarding the feasibility of the use of biodegradable plastics in agriculture. And then you're going to rewrite that as you've already discussed. Then you get to the organization of the board. That's on page 3, line 7. The Secretary of Ag convenes the board. Those that are not ex officio are appointed by the Secretary of Ag. The Secretary designates a chair from the members. There are 13 members. The Secretary of Ag or designee, an active farmer who's a member of a organization representing organic, a member of UVM Center for Sustainable Agriculture, the director of the agency agrochemical program, the director of the agency's water quality program, the commissioner of health or designee, the secretary of natural resources or designee, a certified crop consultant, an active farmer who's a member of an organization representing the dairy industry, an active farmer who's a member of an organization representing fruit or vegetable farmers in Vermont, an active farmer who's a member of an organization representing grass-based non-dairy livestock.
Michael,
soil-
can you just make sure that you put conventional? You didn't say it when you read that.
Yes, I will. Yes, I
Thank
will.
you.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
A soil biologist, a member of an environmental organization that advocates for policy regarding the management or reduction of toxic substances. Then you come to page 4, line 15. Members of the board are appointed for 3 years, except initial appointments shall be made such that one member shall serve for a term of 1 year and one for a term of 2 years. Members other than ex officio members shall be allowed to serve not more than 3 consecutive terms. Those that are not ex officio get compensated per diem and expenses according to the statutory per diem statute. Those payments are made from the pesticide monitoring revolving fund, which is the revenues are from the registration of pesticides annually. The next provision is page 5, line 6, the powers and duties of the board. The board shall issue a report annually to the General Assembly on or before January 15th that recommends policy solutions to assist farmers in reducing the use of and exposure to pesticides and the use of innovative or alternative practices. They'll propose an annual budget report that provides ideas for funding sources for any new programs. That should say programs recommended in the annual report instead of created in the annual report.
Yeah, that's a good change.
And then they shall survey farmers from every county in the state to help better understand how agricultural inputs such as pesticides, fertilizers, and plastics are currently used, as well as current challenges farmers face in reducing these inputs in order to better inform recommendations in the annual report. Then you get to the seed review subsection, which you discussed yesterday. I did not change it, except for that change that you just agreed to as the typo from when the seed review law was enacted. So prior to sale, distribution, or use in the state of new genetically engineered seed, a majority of the Agriculture Innovation Board shall approve of the sale, distribution, or use of the seed. And then in order to ensure the appropriate use of traits of the new genetically engineered seed in the state, the board may propose to the secretary limits or conditions on sale, distribution, or use of the seed, or recommend a limited period of time for sale of the seed. So that is the board's authority. And then you get to the conforming changes, page 6, line 5, section 2, repeals the Pesticide Advisory Council. Page 6, section 3 replaces the Pesticide Advisory Council with the Agricultural Innovation Board regarding the entity that advises the secretary on acceptable control products and methods for use of pesticides. Similarly, page 7, section 4 replaces VPIC with the Ag Innovation Board for the advice to the Secretary of Ag upon regulating the control, sale, use, storage, treatment, and disposal of pesticides. Section 5 is again similar, replacing VPIC with the Ag Innovation Board for the record keeping requirements for pesticide dealers. And then page 8, line 1 through 3, the Ag Innovation Board replaces VPIC regarding advice to the secretary for rules to regulate or implement the pesticide chapter. Section 6 replaces VPIC with the Ag Innovation Board for the regulation of treated article pesticides. And then page 7. It is the amending the seed review section and 6 VSA 642, replacing the seed review committee. The reference to the seed review committee on page 10, lines 11 through 13, with the Ag Innovation Board and who the secretary will consult with regarding sale, distribution, or use of new genetically engineered seed. And then striking the seed review committee on page 11, lines 1 through 19. And that authority is basically transferred to the Ag Innovation Board. Page 12, line 1, section 8. This is the transition section. The secretary shall appoint the members of the Ag Innovation Board on or before January 1, 2022. And then section 9, page 12, line 6. It's effective dates. The act takes effect on January 1, 2022, except that the authority of the secretary to appoint members to the board shall take effect on July 1, 2021. And that's the bill.
Well, are there any questions in regards to the bill as Michael just went through it?
I don't have a question, but I just want you, excuse me. I don't have a question really, but I just want you to know I still have lingering doubts about the lack of a person with expertise in human health effects of pesticides on board. The only human health person, it seems, on the board is the Commissioner of Health or designee, which doesn't necessarily mean it's somebody who really understands the impacts of chemicals on human health, on pesticides on human health. So that I'm not happy with that. I think that we're also, what?
Which number is that, Anthony? F? I think it's F.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk in the bill about pesticides here and there, sort of scattered throughout the proposal, but there's nobody on the board that I can see who actually is qualified to speak about the health effects of pesticides.
Why can't we add a couple of words on F? Let the Commissioner of Health or his designee appoint a person with public health as well as.
Sure. Someone with expertise, I don't know what the phrase is, expertise in the human effects of pesticides, human health effects of pesticides.
Could we add that to F, Michael?
Yep. So
I'm sorry.
The Commissioner of Health or a designee with expertise in the effects of pesticides on human health.
Yeah. I mean, because I still think, we're basically given the turning over what you would think would be the powers and duties of the pesticide advisory board to this new board. And I mean, we're not really telling them the charge of the pesticide advisory council was to find ways to actually reduce the use of pesticides in Vermont. And I'm not saying this board can't do that, but I just feel it's not clear that they're going to try to achieve the same goal. But I know that I'm in a minority on this as well.
Yeah, Chris?
Sarah Polina sort of reminded me of something that I've not been clear at because I missed Friday. And I think that's when you decided to combine the two functions. And I get we don't want boards all over the place, but that is a pretty big departure without much of a redesign. Like the pesticide advisory board is very specific in its charge. This is sort of, hey, figure out what the future of ag is. And oh, by the way, also look at those pesticides. And so could somebody explain to me the shift of trying to also fold in the pesticide role into here? Like, was that just sufficiency or was there more to it than that?
Michael?
the assumption by the board of VPIC's authority has been in the bill it has been in the bill since introduction. And the concept is to expand the scope of activity, scope of authority of the board to look at the issues that keep arising where there is no existing medium or method for reviewing how making recommendations on how certain things should be implemented. You know, biodegradable plastics is a good example of that. And so that's the concept as I understand it, to have the board assume VPIC's authority while expanding the scope and activities that the board will engage in so that there's a medium for discussion of these innovative issues that keep arising in farming.
And I would just say that we're giving them the authority, we're moving the authority over, but we're not moving the charge over. They were charged, the Pesticide Advisory Council had very specific targets. I'm not saying they met those targets, but they had 3 or 4 very specific targets that they laid out in their charge. And they had an overall charge of, I'm paraphrasing, but something to do with meeting the state goals of reducing the pesticide use in Vermont. And I just feel like we're not really being clear on that. We're giving them, we're saying we're replacing you with this new board, but we're leaving behind the specific charges that you had, that we're not taking those with us.
You are correct that everything that VPIC was charged with was not transferred over.
Like what's missing?
Well, let me just mention, and Senator Polino, I kind of disagree. I'm looking at least 3 references to reducing the use and dependence on pesticide. If you go back to page 1, the second charge is to recommend practices that reduce the use of and exposure to pesticides. Then scroll down to page 2, line 11, incentivize farming practices that are looking to reduce the use and dependence on pesticides. Scroll down again to line 17, explore methods and standards for transitioning farmers to practices that reduce pesticide usage. I think there's plenty of references to our intent and desire to reduce pesticide use. It may not be in a list of chart or of what did you call them, targets, but I think there's plenty of stuff in the bill to show our intent. Just my view.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with what you said. I just feel like it's not as clear for me. Okay. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Okay.
It's a question of perception, I guess, and wanting to be clear.
Bobby, you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, Carrie?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Starr. Senator Polino, that's sort of one of the reasons I wanted to join you this morning, is to address some of those concerns that you had about the benchmarks and targets.
Right.
You're working with that language for 20 years, basically since 1999 when that was added. It's very artful language, and I don't think it necessarily gets to the goals that we're trying to put forward with the new language, with the new board. We're trying to make it more clear. That language has always been sort of very convoluted and kind of has always had a double meaning. If you look at some of the charges, sort of reducing the amount of acreage where pesticides are used, that has sort of, we've done that throughout all the permit programs. Coming up through the years in the 80s, we used to see our rights of way wall-to-wall treatment with herbicides. Now they cut and stump treat. Golf courses used to blanket treat their fairways. Now they spot treat where there's fungicide being used. Some of the other sort of things, reducing the risks associated with pesticide use. Well, we've eliminated chlorpyrifos that had high human toxicity, and we've replaced it with neonics that have low human toxicity. So these charges have directed us in a direction that I think this body, this committee that we're sitting in right now, doesn't necessarily like. Increasing the acreage managed by IPM. That's every orchard, every golf course, every right of way, every permit we issue. The Mosquito Control Board has IPM built in. When we talk about decreasing comparable risks, we get pushed towards the new chemistry that we've encouraged for years. The whole bit about establishing benchmarks, we tried that sort of to look at that through a lens. If you just sort of look at atrazine, the labeled rate of atrazine is about, high label rate is 3 pounds per acre for label rate of atrazine, which would allow us on 100,000 acres of corn to use 300,000 pounds of atrazine annually in Vermont legally. We thought maybe a benchmark would be half the label rate, which gets us to 150,000 pounds, and we're still half of that annually. So, you know, using a 30 amount of atrazine, is that an appropriate benchmark? These are the conversations we've struggled with over the years. And I think it doesn't necessarily achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve with this new board. I understand wanting to keep some of that language, but it really encourages status quo.
Well, it sounds like you're saying that you've been making progress towards reaching some of those targets. So I don't know why having targets would increase the status quo. I mean, you mentioned the targets were reducing the amount of acreage where pesticides are used, reducing the risk associated with use of pesticides, increasing acreage managed by means of integrated pest management, decreasing within each level of comparable risk the quantity of pesticides, et cetera. I mean, I just don't understand why we would not be keeping those targets. I mean, I'm not going to.
Nope, I understand, but the language has largely created a shell game. If you use pounds as the benchmark, you can switch from atrazine to the sulfonylurea compounds, which are thousands of times more effective. So you go from pounds of active ingredient to ounces of active ingredient, but you really haven't changed technique. So we're trying to establish a board that encourages a change in technique instead of just a change in chemistry, which that older language really does.
So,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was going to say I disagree. We just have to agree to disagree. I mean, if we're not going to get anywhere, I mean, the goal overall was to work towards the state goal of achieving an overall reduction in the use of toxicity of pesticides. I mean, why wouldn't we take that goal and put it into this new committee?
I feel like it is.
Okay, you feel like it. I'm not getting the feeling.
Now, don't hurt Carrie's feelings, you know. He might feel bad and turn you in.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think we built on what the House sent us and have made, a good bill even better, I think, overall. And we know the old board wouldn't meet or couldn't meet or they had problems meeting or something. And hopefully this new crew that we've got set up in this provision will be interested enough to show up at a meeting and look at and read. I would hope that when their first meeting, Carrie would go through the bill with them, and somebody's got to explain their charge in their duties as a board member. So I would hope that, you know, it would help farmers and golf courses and orchards and mosquito control people, the whole 9 yards, to think a little more about these chemicals and try to cut down on the use if at all possible.
Mr. Chair, Kanika had her hand up.
Oh, you gotta really wave, Kanika, like that. Yeah, go ahead, Kanika.
Thank you, senators. I just wanted to address the Senator Paulina's point about the human health impacts and having someone who's well-versed in that. That's definitely our intent. So when we are working with the secretary to find someone on the board, toxicology and someone who's an expert on human health effects of pesticides will be a big part of that process. So I hope me saying that puts you at ease, but I just want you to know it would not benefit the committee to not have someone who's well-versed in those topics, because that's a big part of what the board is going to do. And the second thing I want to say is that a lot of this will be testimony based. So is that if there is some sort of debate or discussion about certain chemicals, certain chemistries, and their effect on human health, I'd hope that we would find people who are very well-versed in that to come in, if only for a session, if they're not on the board. So I hope that that kind of puts your mind at ease, because that is a big part of what we want to do.
Yep. Any other questions? What do you guys think about voting this out? Would you rather wait until Michael comes back with that printed reversion of that one section? I think you had two places, right? You had to put the word conventional in one other place, Michael?
I had to put the word conventional in front of dairy industry. I had to rewrite the subdivision on the use of the biodegradable plastics. I had to replace in the Commissioner of Health, it's a Commissioner of Health or a designee with expertise in the effects of pesticides on human health. And then for the annual budget report, it would be for those things that are recommended instead of created. And then the change that Margaret Lagus had recommended to the typo. I've already made those changes. I can send you a copy right now with the changes highlighted if you would like.
Yeah, that would be good, and we can go right through them and so
it's on its way.
on its way.
Yep. You should each be getting an individual email. I also sent it to Linda and Carrie and Kanika.
Linda, are you able to post that for us?
As soon as I get, oh, here it is. Yep.
I'll be right back. I'm just printing a record of action.
Pardon?
I said I'll be right back. I'm just printing a record of action. If we do vote this thing out, I need that. And those little
Yeah.
sheets.
Gary, Mr. Chair, Carrie may have a question. He looks a little fidgety.
Carrie does?
No,
Well,
no,
he's gonna wait until I call on him, I hope.
yes.
That'll be next week, Carrie. But seeing we got a little bit of time, we'll let you squeeze in.
It was just while we're waiting here, I did want to reassure Senator Polina that the current sort of person from the health department that sits on the council is Sarah Vos, and her master's work was at Berkeley in pesticide toxicology. She was in the same lab as Tyrone Hayes, who did all the atrazine work. And as long as Sarah's with us at the health department, we plan on having her sit on the council.
That would be good. Has she served, or you did say she did serve on the old board? Did
Yes,
she?
she's currently on the council as the Department of Health's representative.
Yeah. And what about 4 times a year is, I think we got it in there, you'd meet 4 times. Is that often enough?
I
But you
think
can meet more often, right?
Right.
correct.
Okay.
It doesn't actually say how often they're supposed to meet.
Oh. I don't know why I thought it was 4 times, but maybe that was in a different bill. So shouldn't that, what do you guys think? Shouldn't they meet on a quarterly basis or something? I mean, if you don't
Seems
put
like it.
that in. How
Yeah.
does that work, Carrie, now? How do you call a meeting if you don't have a certain time to have a meeting?
The council's gone anywhere from meeting monthly to meeting just twice a year over the years. Anyone on if there's an issue to talk about, if there's an agenda topic, there was a hold for a monthly meeting if needed, but that was when we would be meeting face to face. That was a year or 2 ago.
So does the committee want to put a number, at least, or no fewer than, or something like that, number in there, so that at least the committee they'll know that they're gonna, when they sign up to be on it, that it's gonna take at least 4 different times during the year, their time.
Yep.
Um,
Is 4 the magic number?
No fewer than,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
No
no-
fewer than 4, so that it could be unlimited. They could meet every week if they want, but
Yeah, if they had a crisis, they could meet more often. Would you want to add that in there, Michael, someplace?
Sure, I think it would be best in 4964 subdivision B4, which would be on page 5. And it would say, the board shall meet no fewer than 4 times a year.
Yep. No, that should work. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mike. I thought we had that time in there that they had to meet, 4 times. But anyways. So has everybody got their new copy, Chris?
yeah, I've got it. Linda posted it. Michael, the chair's going to need to take this down the hall because there's meeting per diems and stuff. But in your impression, does it balance out having deleted VPIC, or are we going to face that little battle? in terms of paying for them to meet.
I thought that was gonna come out of the pesticide fund.
It is.
Okay.
It shouldn't have any effect on, other than his 3 million he's got sitting in reserve. It could raise heck with that. He's gonna pay him like $500 a meeting like Richie gets going to his bank meeting.
You are eliminating the seed review committee. And so the seed review committee doesn't have any specific per diem, but I would ask the agency, does the agency give those people expenses?
Carrie says no.
No, the seed committee, no.
So you're really, it's kind of a 1-to-1. You're not really increasing or decreasing the funds necessary to run this. You theoretically are going to increase it because they now get per diems when VPIC was only getting expenses, right? And so it'll be $200 more per year for 13 people. So, $2,600.
Against his 3 million, it's gonna really put a dent in his savings account.
Well, it just gives us less when we steal it later.
Well, I wonder, would it be finance, or would it be approach, that might have to give it a green light?
So there's no revenue generation in it. The
So
revenue's generated by the pesticide registration fees, which is not in the bill. So it would be approached most likely if Secretary Bloomer prefers it there at all.
Maybe, maybe when we turn the bill in, we could put a kind of highlight for Bloomer that the money's gonna come from the fund, and it's gonna mean an additional $2,800. Did you say 2,800, Michael?
I think it's going to be 26, right? It's 13 members, $200, $550 a meeting, 4 meetings, it's $200. So that's 2,600.
Yeah. Well, we'll just have to see if Jane wants to look at it, but it's, it shouldn't hold it up. After this week, it shouldn't hold it up too long because she wants to get the approach bill out, I think, early, either the tail end of this week or Tuesday of next week. So, and maybe I'll mention it to her this afternoon. Okay. You want to check that language on those rewrites? Oh, golly. I see Corey got his change in there. Everything look good to you guys?
I'm not feeling so good.
Well, you look a little pale.
Well, I don't get outside anymore. I haven't been outside in 8 months.
Well, join the club. Sit here in the front of the iPad all day and computer.
Yeah, it's really unhealthy.
A lot of fun.
But I'm leaning against supporting the bill at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's fine as long as you just don't get disagreeable about it.
No, I'm not the type to get too disagreeable.
But Yeah, Anthony, we got a lot of good stuff in here too.
Yeah. We had a lot of good stuff in the pesticide advisory council too. That's the thing.
So the meeting isn't in this latest draft, right, Michael?
No, it is not. It is
Yeah.
not. I've already added that. I can resend you the new draft with the meeting
Well,
revision.
I'm just making it, I don't need to see it necessarily. I just wanted to make the point.
Well, is there any reason anybody have a reason not to vote this thing out, Chris?
Well, I'm wondering if there's some language that brings Senator Polina comfort to entertain. I must say that I sort of feel okay about this, but I am noting that we're getting, certainly it seems rural Vermont and others are concerned and we're moving fast, and I don't pretend to be expert enough to know.
My argument is they've gotten a lot from us this year in other bills.
Well, sure, but I mean, they're often partners with us, and this is sort of like they've been trying to innovate the ag community for 30 years. And here we have a bill that aims to do that they're opposing. So I wish I understood why better.
It's the same with NOFA. I mean, they usually come up with ideas that we can support, and they're not supporting this either.
So Anthony, what language would make you feel better?
Well, I think there's two possibilities, which we've already talked about. One would be just making sure that we include the overall charge. And again, I forget the exact words, but just, I could find the words or somewhere in my emails and whatnot, but to move towards a state goal of reducing the overall use of pesticides, et cetera, some language like that, that makes it clear that we're going to go along with the earlier charge of the pesticide advisory council. And I know that there's pesticides there's mentioned in these things. I'm not saying that's not the case. The other thing would be to go back to the original charges and, make clear that we want to reduce the number of acres where pesticides are used, that kind of stuff. But we've already talked about that stuff, and I don't get the sense that there's a desire to do that, quite honestly.
Well, no, I don't know if we've had a clear-cut proposal before us where we could add a couple of lines in that would say that. It should be somewheres, I would think, in the front of, when we first start out. If that's the case, right? Right in the very beginning, if we could throw something in there.
Would it be a big deal to wait till tomorrow and try to do a little homework here?
No, I mean, we've got time. It's all, this is a House bill, and, hopefully we send it back and they can accept our proposals of amendment and move forward. If not, we, take a couple of days for a committee or conference, that's all. But if we're gonna go until mid-May, which I heard that we may go an extra week, so.
I heard that also. I heard now May 22nd.
Yeah.
Well, considering it's still snowing
June
outside my
15th,
window.
I'm calling it now.
So, no, a day, one way or the other, isn't gonna make a bit of difference as far as I'm concerned, Chris. So, Michael, do you have any suggestions where we could put something in like Anthony was talking about, long as he doesn't go haywire on us?
So I am putting together a side by side of the VPIC authority versus the AIB authority for recommending practices that reduce the use of and exposure to pesticides. Basically, the difference is the target recommendations that Carrie was referencing earlier, and things like the reducing the amount of acreage where pesticides are used, etc. That's the big difference. The overall charge to recommend practices. Well, VPIC says targets and AIB says practices. So I think you can get a good, I don't know, concept of the differences if you would like.
Is that something you could send us?
Yeah, I'm just finishing it right now.
So
How do you find the energy to work during all this conversation?
he's
I
a
know.
Big butt.
He's
dual
unburdened.
master.
He's unburdened by the decisions. See,
That's true. He just glides past.
Well, you want 5 or 10 minutes, Michael?
I just need maybe one more minute. I just need to check a citation. Hold on a second.
You guys getting a lot of requests for money? No,
Me?
You're lucky.
Hey, Chris, I heard there's some excitement in finance yesterday with PPP. I didn't
Oh, yeah?
see it, but
it's the most confused. It's done wonders for the chamber's email list, but it's completely a fabricated dynamic. We people think we decided not to forgive the taxes. All we said was we want to yet decide. We had to deal with 2020 quickly and we wanted time. And so everybody comes in and how could you do this? Oh, we're like, well, anyway, it wasn't that. It was very straightforward. A few people couldn't hear us. And so they went on, how could you sort of strange, but whatever. Bobby, I am hearing that you'll want to check your email from your afternoon chair about our local foods incentives. That seems to need your attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just remember, this is rural economic development. It's not food security stuff.
Right.
It's we're going to just throw away tons of business assistant money, which will help them, but it's not going to be very targeted. And then we'll go scrapping for $500,000 for farmers.
Yeah, we'll get the chaff and they'll eat all the clover. We'll get the leftovers.
Well,
That's
I
okay.
think you can turn that around, mister.
So
Somebody
you
muted you on.
should have received the side by side.
Yeah, I got it, Michael.
And so you'll see that the first sentence of the VPIC authority in 1102 is pretty similar to the sentence in 4964A2. What is different is that specificity after that first sentence, where in VPIC, the target should be designed to enable evaluation of multiple measures of pesticide usage, use patterns, and associated risks. And then they should take into consideration at a minimum the following: reducing the amount of acreage where pesticides are used, reducing the risks associated, increasing the acreage managed by IPM, decreasing the quantity of pesticides applied per acre, and making recommendations regarding the implementation of other management practices that result in decreased pesticide use. So I think it's whether or not you want to have the board recommend targets for reduction or recommend practices that reduce the overall use and exposure, and then whether or not you want to get into that specificity about what the practices or targets should address.
Well,
We already have, if you look at the last one there, which is E, making recommendations regarding the implementation, et cetera, and then you take a look at on page, oh boy, page 2, line 17, explore methods and standards for transitioning farmers to practices that reduce pesticide usage. It's pretty much the same thing, I would say. So we already have one of those targets, Anthony.
so we got E. You think E in there, Brian,
I'm saying that E in the side-by-side
is in the fourth,
Is-
34?
it's not word for word, Mr. Chair, but it's similar to line 17 and 18 on page 2 of the bill.
There is also the report under the AIB where they report to the General Assembly annually recommended policy solutions to assist farmers in reducing the use of and exposure to pesticides and the use of innovative or alternative practices. So that's focused on farmers, but there is another component of reduction that's built into the bill.
Does that take the place of one of the others? Would that be D?
I think it's more kind of a combination of A and B.
So
I mean, I like
Well,
what we
they-
have. I like what we have in the bill. Since COVID, I mean, there's my argument with Rommel. It's science. Science is going to continue to innovate agriculture and other industries. And we may want, we're all happy we just got a vaccine that science put together in the last year. I have a hard time saying, when we talk about the way we wrote it is that, we're looking at synthetic, but some of these things we might find out something might get invented in 20 years. It's really good for everybody, including plant and soil health. So I don't know. I think we're overreacting here.
well, we're trying to reach some middle ground so Polina can get on the boat with us.
I think when you look at the extent of our work over this year, we're still at a middle ground area. Maybe not on one bill, but when you consider, the extent of the work we've done this year,
Well,
all the
we
pieces of
still-
legislation combined. Yeah.
We still haven't accomplished our small fruits and veggies and that yet. That's getting bounced around now, so. So Anthony, have you got any suggestions on where if A and B are sort of covered, is there any clarifying language that you'd like to see in the bill that would make that a little more clear?
Well, actually, when you go back right up to the top at the first sentence, to recommend targets with respect to the state goal of achieving an overall reduction in the use of pesticides consistent with sound pest or vegetative management practices, and to measure the state's progress in reaching those targets and attaining that goal. That in itself is better, I mean, what comes after that are the specific targets. Maybe the group could come up with its own targets, but I think it's important for the group the new group to recommend targets that are going to achieve the overall goal of reducing the use of pesticides. Otherwise, we don't know if we're getting anywhere. I mean, why not have targets that are set up to try to achieve the goals? So there's a part of me that could go with just that first sentence, replacing the other one, or in addition to the other one, but to recommend targets with respect to the state goal of achieving an overall reduction in the use of pesticides, et cetera.
Targets, not practices, but targets. You
Right.
don't want to do it to recommend practices? Did Carrie?
I'm thinking.
Yeah, I already stated that our intention in the rewrite it of this, or reinvigoration of the board, was to keep that original intent. And if you want to add that first sentence in addition to what is currently in the bill, so you have that first sentence and also the sentence about recommend practices that reduce the use and exposure, that doesn't change the intent at all of what we were trying to do.
So,
If the committee, if this is a negotiation, that first sentence to me doesn't change the intent of what we're trying to do with this board. And it's never been, that charge is not something we were trying to move away from. And I felt like it was incorporated in there, just not in that first sentence. So if we're not opposed to seeing that first sentence.
what's the committee think about altering that? To add that, where would we put that, Michael, if we were gonna add that?
I am playing with the language right now. I'm going to send you all some proposed language. It probably doesn't do, probably not everybody's going to like it at all.
You want to
See
share
what-
it on the screen, Michael?
Sure. Yeah, I just sent it to myself, emailed myself, and hold on a second. Here we go. I had to be made a co-host.
I don't mean to make it more complicated. I thought that was an easy solution.
You could just read it, Michael.
Okay, I can do that. It would say recommend practices that reduce the use of and exposure to pesticides and synthetic fertilizers in order to protect soil biology, human health, and environmental health, comma, including recommending targets to achieve the state goal of an overall reduction in the use of pesticides consistent with sound pest or vegetative management practices. So I can try to share it now.
Sounds like you've just tacked it on to the end there.
I have.
Yeah.
All right, can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, see.
There's a typo in there.
Including.
So this keeps the targets in there.
Right,
Yeah, what do you think, Anthony? Doesn't look bad. I don't know if you're getting suggested changes.
No, I think it looks okay. I'm just reading it again.
Hmm. Any other comments from other members?
It's okay to me.
Yeah, Chris? Yeah, looks okay. What about Corey? What do
I'm
you,
fine
what
with
do
it.
you want now, Corey?
I'm fine with that.
Well, if we can get him on board, that'll help.
all right, should I stop sharing?
Yes, everybody got it. You're okay, Michael. So, Anthony, you think that language would be fine?
Yes, Brian had his hand up though. I don't know if you wanted to say
Yeah.
something first.
I just wanted to double check with Carrie or Kanika that we're not running afoul of anything that's intended here. You're both okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
So
Yeah,
what
you
this
wouldn't
would
wanna
mean,
run over Carrie.
what this would mean the best of worlds would be when the group meets, they'll decide to discuss some targets that they're going to have to achieve. And then when those of us who track this stuff can go to them later on and say, what were your targets and did you reach them?
Well, they at least have to back with a report to see what the heck they're doing, right? And
Right.
so we would get some kind of a feeling for what direction they were going in. So you want to get a copy of that all printed and then wait until morning to vote on this, or do you
Yeah.
feel comfortable in moving it this morning?
Let's do it tomorrow.
Yeah. So Michael, you want to make that last change, and we'll tomorrow morning at 9, we've got we got that meeting with the Innovation Board. And at 10:30, we've got a meeting with ACCD folks today. Do you have any time later this morning, Michael?
I don't. I have to go see another committee about the sinking of the ferry. And then I've got
You're gonna sink a ferry?
yeah.
We're
And then
trying as hard as we can. That's my afternoon committee.
Then I have a sort of a confidential meeting that I can't discuss at 11.
So, Mr. Chair, if we were to meet at 10:30 tomorrow morning, instead of taking the break, it'll only take us 2 seconds to vote this out. You have a break on.
Oh,
the-
yeah, we've got a break. We've got a break there in the, yeah. Yeah, we've got, what about maybe 10:30? We can do it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, or 10:40, because the morning is in joint session. So that way we take our little break, come back 5 minutes earlier on our channel.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like a mini plan.
Does that work for
So
the
Anthony, you're
senator from
good.
Washington?
Yes, sir.
Pardon?
Thank you.
So we're all good to go, guys. And if you want to take a quick break, we could do that. And then we've got ACCD people. We don't want to keep them waiting too long. So thanks, Carrie and Kanika and Michael. It's been a lot of help, and hopefully in the morning, we'll get this thing voted out. Brian, would you want to report this bill?
I'd be glad to, Mr. Chair.
Yep, okay. So anyway,